So, no, I wouldn't say I have a passion for HR.
Welcome back to Human Resources for the People. It's a human capital revolution. Today we're going to be talking about firing someone in Iran. This article is from Dad Flamingo. It's written by these people. I think that these are pretty interesting. I did a video on hiring someone in Iran, and I found it to be really interesting. There were some gender protections that I didn't expect. There was a lot of discussion surrounding protecting pregnant people. But this one is here from Dad Flamingo. I think they did the other one, and we're going to react to what it looks like to work and be fired in Iran. So there is employers are allowed to dismiss employees for valid reasons, such as failing to perform their job duties, violation of disciplinary regulations, as long as they've been written up first. But the employer has to go in front of the workplace's Islamic Labor Council, and then if the Labor Council is with it, then they can go ahead and terminate. I think that's really interesting. I'm curious. I mean, obviously, it's a religious state. I'm curious, what, if anything, Islam plays in employment. If you're Muslim and you have experience with Islamic labor law, please leave a comment down below. What does Islamic labor law mean, or is it just simply a name that this labor council has been given? I am really curious. And in addition, it's the workplace's labor council, which means that it has a situation similar to Germany and many other Nordic countries, for example, where there is a workplace labor person, the works council, for example, in Germany, and these places, sway or have a lot of hold over these people have a lot of hold over what happens to the employees, but they are actually like they actually work for the company as well. It's HR truly for the people, right? So that's what's interesting. I think that I have seen where the labor council is required to go to, but frankly, religion hasn't been tossed in there before, as far as I can remember. And B, I'm not sure what exactly this plays. Of course, in the United States, unless you're at a union shop, you don't have to go to a labor council, and certainly not an Islamic labor council. And frankly, you could fire someone even if they were part of the union. You would just have a grievance and all the things that go with that. Next up is whether or not there needs to be a termination notice prior to dismissal. And many places around the world, they allow you to fire someone, but then just pay them out. So, for example, if you fire someone with 3 years, you may have to pay them 3 months worth of severance instead of letting them work the rest of their contract. In Iran, you don't have to give notice prior to termination, but employees who have violated disciplinary rules are required to receive written warnings, which is pretty interesting. I mean, like, that was captured in the previous paragraph, but that is somewhat what the United States practices, although it's not in law. You don't have to provide a written warning, but most American companies do, and frankly, provide more warnings than just a written warning. And so there can be contractual stipulations where, for example, the contract says that they have to work a certain amount of time, but payment in lieu of notice is not available. So you can't say, "Hey, I'm going to fire you ahead of time." And there is no way that Iranians can fire someone without notice or without payment in lieu of notice. And the problem with having these discussions about labor laws throughout the world is to which extent they exist in reality, right? What is the enforcement like? In the United States, there's a lot of laws that aren't actually acted upon, right? Either the person is unfamiliar with the law itself, the person who's been terminated, or, which is part of the reason why this channel is here, or it's one of those things where, it's just not that important. So I'm curious to what level of enforcement you typically see in Iran. And frankly, most countries that I follow, especially developing countries. And so, following from that, when an employee has worked for 1 year or more, the employer has to make severance payments to the employee equivalent to 1 month per 1 year of service, which is pretty crazy. I don't see a cap here. I think that's a very interesting concept. I think that not having a cap could be pretty serious. Although, I think this is an interesting line, where termination is due to a work-related deterioration of the physical or mental health of an employee, the employer must pay an amount equivalent to 2 months of the employee's final salary payment for each year of service. It has to be confirmed by a medical committee, but I think that's interesting. I mean, at least it has to be confirmed by a medical committee. Although I'm curious what level, just like in the United States, what these doctors actually do, because as a person who has to deal with FMLA requests, I sometimes I don't know about these medical committees. But regardless, I think that's a really interesting 2 months for every year. There is a procedural requirement for dismissing an employee. You have to gain approval of the workplace's Islamic Labor Council, like we talked about. And there is circumstances where an employee is protected from dismissal. For example, employers are not permitted to terminate an employment relationship if an employer ceases to work with an employee, it'd be illegal. And and it's illegal when there's a workplace closure and the employee is unable to fulfill the duties. You can also suspend an employee if they take educational leave or other unpaid leave in accordance with the labor code, and may be suspended for the duration of the leave. But up to 2 years, employers may not dismiss employees during the period. I think this is an interesting one, the next one, which is employees detained by law enforcement, but it's not a conviction. Employers cannot dismiss the employee for this reason. In the United States, you could, but that's not, I mean, I don't know how common it is. It's possible, though. And in addition, and of course, employers may not dismiss employees if the latter is called up to armed services. That makes complete sense. The United States has what's called USERRA, which is the United States Reemployment Act. It's for veterans. It protects their position, and it's called USERRA, and it provides for the same things, but I think I always want to call that out. That's very similar circumstances to the United States. We're two peas in a pod, the United States and Iran. There are no rules with respect to mass terminations, which I really am impressed with and interested in, because that is such a common requirement. The United States, of course, has the WARN Act, which is a requirement of notice, but Iran does not have a notice or a requirement with respect to mass terminations or layoffs. And so I think that that's an interesting thing. And then finally, are employers allowed to impose a mandatory retirement age, and what's the age? And if employees have paid Social Security premiums for at least 10 years, they may request to retire once they've reached 60 or 55 years of age, respectively, men and women. So men can retire at 60, women at 55. And I think that that's interesting. In the United States, that's considered discriminatory 100%. It's considered discriminatory to, of course, treat women and men differently, but in addition, it's discriminatory based on age. You don't have mandatory retirement ages in the United States. There's a reason for that. I say that as a general rule. I believe that there are certain industries that do. If I recall correctly, the FAA, or sorry, the flight controllers, they have a minimum or mandatory retirement age, but generally speaking, there is not one. Let me know what you think about this. Please comment down below. What is the most interesting law you've seen here from Iran? Like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye, guys.